we are serious about rebuilding the American middle class, if we are serious about reinvigorating American democracy, we need to develop a political movement which, once again, is prepared to take on and defeat a ruling class whose greed is destroying our nation.
The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. Now that is right out of the Communist Manifesto. And if you can't, of course, that's just one little statement out of the entire Communist Manifesto, which isn't a huge thing to read. You can read it in a day. It's not a massive book or anything. Nevertheless, that gives you just an idea. It's the time-old tactic of the struggle and the battle between the proletariat and the bourgeois. This is just the same thing all over again. And they want to continue to tell you, no, it's not the same. We're not communist. It's the same thing. If you look like a duck and you quack like a duck, well, you're a damn duck. It's not that hard to figure out. So what I want to do is I want to look at some examples of socialism. Okay, we're going to look at the good and the bad. So first, right now, everyone now is pointing towards Vietnam, okay? And we're going to get into Vietnam. But right now, let's just start with kind of the trending news that's going on right now is Venezuela. And I'm by no means the first person to touch on this. However, I do want to go into some detail about Venezuela. Mostly what I see right now about Venezuela is involved with whether we should or should not get involved militarily in Venezuela, or we're seeing that just the obvious, it's collapsed, right? Socialism has failed in Venezuela. So I want to go back and look, okay, because I was curious myself. What did this look like before, when Hugo Chavez was in power? Because right now it's pretty much tanked. Let's see here. We've got some articles. Nicolas Maduro took over in 2013. Okay, and if you look at any of the graphs that we're about to look at here in just a moment, you'll see that when Nicolas Maduro took over, the economy tanked. I mean, just absolutely tanked. Now, it was already going badly before he got in office. Nevertheless, when he got in there, it took a straight nosedive down. I mean, this guy didn't have a clue what he was doing, and still doesn't. He's still there. So, let's start with some information. This is right off of Wikipedia. Really easy to find. Okay, you can just look up, Hugo Chavez. You can look up Nicolas Maduro, and you can just go to the Wikipedia page for Venezuela economy. So, I'm going to read a little bit of this to you. Hugo Chavez was elected president in December of 1998 and took office in February of 1999. In 2000, oil prices soared, offering Chavez funds not seen since Venezuela's economic collapse in the 1980s. Chavez then used economic policies that were more social democratic than those of his predecessors, using populist approaches with oil funds that made Venezuela's economy dependent on high prices. So they've got this major natural resource of oil. Prices are up. Things are looking great. And he immediately starts going into more socialistic programs and spending. Okay, we've got all this money. We're going to spend a lot of money. You apply this to your home. You're a salesman or something like that. You're making big bucks, and you're going and you're spending all this money, but you're not putting any away. Right? You're just spending it because you have it now, and you're not looking at long term. You're just looking at right now. The instant gratification, which is one of the core principles at the very base of socialism is you're not getting everything you want. It's a very childish ideology that it's not fair. I'm not getting what I want. I'm not happy right now. I'm not satisfied right now. And that's essentially Hugo Chavez. That's exactly what he bought into, and that's what he was doing himself. Oil prices were up. Things were looking great. Let's spend that money, boys. So, in the first 4 years of the Chavez presidency, the economy grew at first from 1999 to 2001, then contracted from 2001 to 2003 to GDP levels similar to 97. At first, the economic decline was due to low oil prices. So, right here we see the decline, right? The economy was booming when the oil went up. Now it's declining when the oil goes down. Very dependent on oil. But it was fueled by the turmoil of the 2002 coup attempt and the 2002 to 2003 business strike. So these two things.
Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez issued 49 decrees intended to move Venezuela away from its neoliberal policies. They included critical issues such as land reform and oil wealth distribution. President Hugo Chavez announced a reform in the state-owned oil company PDVSA and that he would be redistributing oil revenue towards social spending for the poor. Shortly after, Venezuela's private media reported that the director of the CIA and the U.S. State Department were concerned about Hugo Chavez. The response from Venezuela's elite wasn't long in coming. An estimated 300,000 demonstrators rallied at the state oil company. Through the urging of one of the speakers, the demonstrators illegally marched to the presidential palace, Miraflores. Crowds to both sides clashed with each other and the police. While demonstrators from both sides were on an overpass, shots were fired, killing 19 people and wounding 69. Private television channels accused Chavez of being responsible for the shootings. At around 3:30 a.m., Chavez was taken prisoner by members of the military to a nearby island. The public was told that Chavez had resigned and had asked to be taken to Cuba. In the early hours of the 12th of April, army generals handed the presidency to businessman Pedro Carmona. During a televised appearance, Carmona made a decree that abolished all state institutions. Once word had spread that Chavez did not resign, people from the local barrios marched in their numbers to the presidential palace, demanding the return of President Chavez. Behind Carmona's back, members of the military loyal to Chavez took back the palace. Carmona and many others involved in the coup managed to escape. At around 4 a.m., President Chavez returned to Miraflores, greeted by some 40,000 supporters.
So it is for this exact reason why I do not like a democracy. Number one, of course, in the United States, we do not live in a democracy, and for good reason. A democracy is nothing more than the mob rule. The 51% can vote out the rights of the other 49%. And it's for that reason that we have a constitutional republic where we elect officials. Those officials are ruled by the law of the land, the United States Constitution, and they cannot operate outside of those rules. I don't care if enough of you nimwits get in office or vote someone into office that wants to just get rid of the Constitution. They cannot do so. That's not something that you can do in the United States of America, and we have that by design. In this case, you will see that a lot of these people supported Chavez, even though we can look back and see that these policies were catastrophic for Venezuela. Catastrophic, and we're not there yet. We're not to that point yet. But when you see people and they're saying, look, the people love these policies. Well, yes, but just because somebody loves something, that may mean that they're only loving it right now. They're not looking at the big picture. They're not looking at long term, especially for those that are really poor. The unfortunate reality is this, okay? And Thomas Sowell, in his book Basic Economics, he touches on this. There's going to be a hierarchy. You're going to always have a lower class and a higher class. Now, if you want to consider it something like an Overton window, you can take our poor and our rich, and if you move that Overton window up, you'll still have a poor class and an upper class. No matter what, you'll always have that hierarchy. Now, just so happens to be that the poor in the United States are very wealthy in comparison to other people in other countries that, that are poor would be considered rich to many. So that all that being said, I think we need to kind of take that into grasp when we hear someone say, yeah, but the people over there love those policies. Maybe they do, but 10 years from now, they may not love them at all. You always have to look at the economy on the bigger picture. You always have to look long term and say, how's this going to affect the society as a whole long term? Socialism is nothing more than instant gratification. There's never a sacrifice for now for the greater good of later. That's just, it doesn't happen that way. It's just redistribution of wealth. And in this case, they were going to redistribute all the oil wealth. And now you have not just the government economy reliant on this oil wealth and oil prices, mind you. The oil prices must stay high. As soon as the oil prices tank, the government goes down and so do the people. Okay, so there's your equality for you. From hand to mouth reliance on the government goes down, so does everybody else. It's terrible. So let's continue on. Let's talk about the housing market in Venezuela. The housing market in Venezuela shrunk significantly, with developers avoiding Venezuela due to the massive number of companies who have had their property expropriated by the government. According to the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal, Venezuela had the weakest property rights in the world, scoring only 5.0 on a scale of 100, with expropriation without compensation being common. The shortage of housing is so significant that in 2007, a group of squatters occupied, I'm going to butcher this, Centro Financiero Confinanzas, a canceled economic center that was supposed to symbolize Venezuela's growing economy. That's so ironic and hilarious. But it's not, because you had a group of squatters that had to stay there, and I feel bad for those people. I do. But it is kind of amusing, I guess. I don't know. Probably shouldn't have said that. Nevertheless, this is all great and all, unless you appreciate private property. And this was in 2007, mind you. So remember that all these people, before the 2016 elections, around 2014, 2013, 2012, that were pointing at socialism, really when socialism was really starting to become mainstream in the United States, and you said, just show me one good example of socialism. And they said, just look to Venezuela. Or remember back when we were talking about Obamacare, just look to Venezuela. Yeah, great. That's fine. That is, again, unless you must not have any problem at all with the government expropriating your private property. No big deal. Yeah, not in America. No, thank you. So we're going to continue on. I just want to dump information on you here. The inflation rate, as measured by Consumer Price Index, was 35.8% in 1998. This is really boring information, but I'm just trying to give you the information, and in a minute we're going to get on to more current things. So, 1998, it is 35.8% inflation rate, falling to a low of 12.5% in 2001, and rising to 31.1% in 2003. Historically, the highest yearly inflation was 100% in 1996. In an attempt to support the bolster the government's declining level of international reserves, and mitigate the adverse impact from the oil industry stoppage on the financial system, the Ministry of Finance and the central bank suspended foreign exchange trading. On the 23rd of January 2003. So, if you're in the United States, economy's going bad, crap, inflation's getting out of hand, sorry if you wanted to order that thing off of wish.com, it's not going to happen. Sorry. On the 6th of February, the government created CADIVI, a currency control board charged with handling foreign exchange procedures. The board set the U.S. dollar exchange rate at 1,596 bolivars to the dollar for purchases and 1,600 to the dollar for sales. So, when we're talking about inflation rate in the United States, when we're talking about monetary policy, The national debt has a big deal to do with that, and it's the Federal Reserve's responsibility to monitor how much money flows into the market, okay? Because the more money that gets put into the market, the lesser the value is of the dollar, and that's also inflation. What does that mean? That means this. That means if we're looking at something like Venezuela and their inflation is really high and the value of their currency is really low, that means that when they come to the United States and they want to buy something, $1 of ours is worth 1,596 bolivars of theirs, okay? That is a massive difference in value of currency, okay? So when us crazy conservatives or us crazy free market advocates are always harping about the inflation rates, we're always harping about the national debt, this stuff matters. The value of our currency matters, okay? And when you go to buy things in foreign trade, foreign exchange, when you buy things from other countries, if your currency and the value of your currency has tanked, that may not make a bit of difference if your country is completely self-reliant and you're only trading within your country. But when you go to buy foreign goods, which almost all countries are reliant on foreign exchange and foreign trade because we do not produce everything that we need. Those things that we buy, the lower the value of our currency goes down. When we buy things from other countries, it costs us more money, essentially. It costs us more labor and time to buy those things. So that means that the price of everything goes up. So if we go and we buy a bunch of steel from someone else, or if we buy oil, or we buy any kind of natural resource from other countries, and then we're going to take those resources and build other things with them, the price of our goods here goes up. That is inflation. That's bad. All right, that's not what we want. We want to keep the value of our currency in good standings. This is the struggle that Venezuela was dealing with. Okay, so now we're going to move on here. Now this is moving on. So we've just learned a little bit about Hugo Chavez's economy, and it was already struggling. So I just wanted you to know that ahead of time and see that, you know, when Chavez brought in some of these socialistic policies, the economy was already starting to struggle. Now, when Nicolas Maduro took over in 2013, if you'll look at this chart here, I'm about to put it up on the screen for you. Okay, if you'll look at this chart right here, look at the GDP. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is starting from when he took, this is from 2012, and he came into 2013. So as you can see, for a year period there, it was already tanking. So it's not as if it was entirely Maduro's fault here. You can see it was already on the downslope. So then it comes up a little bit and then just tanks, goes down farther and farther and farther. The GDP totally crashes. Now, this next one I'm going to show you. It's now that I've explained a little bit about what inflation does and the impact it has for your life and what this really means, these numbers will be very significant to you so you can understand. Look at this inflation rate. 2013, they're at a 43.53% inflation rate. You come up to 2016, 254%. Never mind that. Look at current date, 2019, 10 million % inflation. That's an astronomical number. I mean, you might as well have went with 100 million or a trillion. It doesn't matter. Their money is worthless. That's worthless. There's I mean, if you had to pay cash, imagine having to pay $10 million, having to bring 10 million what's it, Boulevardiers or whatever it is, for the to buy a Coke. I mean, it's worthless money. It's totally worthless. So yeah, that Venezuela's economy has totally crashed. It couldn't get any worse. I mean, it's done. And now, not getting into too much about Maduro, and rather we should take some kind of military action in Venezuela and stuff like that. That I don't know that we do or not. I think that's a topic for another video. But I will say that Nicolas Maduro and these policies that they have got to go. They're not working. If he stays, he's going to have to accept the fact that your economic policies have crashed. Okay. Now, this is just an example. But if you look at someone like China or Russia, everywhere that you had a form of communism or socialism, when they went to its fullest extreme, it was tanking and it crashed. China's economy only started to rise back up and start to come back when they relaxed the economy and started to allow some free markets to flow. Thomas Sowell really does a great job of explaining this in his book, Basic Economics. I highly recommend that you read that damn thing. I have not read all of it. I just started reading it. That's kind of why I'm referencing it. But man, it's a good book. He really touches on a lot of these topics and puts it in a perspective for the average person to understand. So it's great. Anyways, but you've got a lot of these countries. You'll see. So let's look during around the Cold War time. If you looked at East Germany, it was occupied, right, of course, by the Soviet Union. And they built this wall around this thing, and they were really trying to make communism work here. But it kept tanking. It would not work. So the only time it was successful was when they finally had a wall built around the entire eastern part of Germany, and a wall around, or a wall separating West and East Germany, and then a wall completely around Berlin, because Berlin, of course, was also kind of a hub. East and West Berlin was separated as well, so that was kind of a hub for people to get out of East Germany and into West Germany. Now, they wanted to create communism, which was very hard to do when right across the way there you had a capitalist free market society that was booming. The food shelves were full. People were living great. Okay? And over here you have communism where everything is going really bad. I mean, people are starving. It's not good. The only time that it started to look promising was when they forced everybody to stay there. They had to force everyone, and that's what socialism always comes down to. You always have to regulate everything and force everything. Nothing is going to happen naturally, okay? Because if you start to regulate businesses and you start to overtax businesses, they're going to run. If you want a good example of that, let's just look at Alexandria-Cortez with Amazon in New York. They ran them right out, okay? They ran them slap out of there. They said, we don't, and the unions were going to basically run them out anyways. But some interviews had come out, and they were saying, God, I can't remember who was in the interviews. I'll have to get this information for you probably in another video. I think I'm going to do a video on just this topic because there's a lot to cover on this. But in this, what came out is they said, we don't need to hit them on the front end with all of these union requirements that they're going to have to adhere to before they get here. We need to let them get here and build and get established first, then we bring them to them, because they knew that it would run them off. And so in a world like we have now, if they can just go somewhere else, they're going to. Okay, these massive corporations that bring lots and lots of really great jobs to people. Everyone always likes to bash on the big corporations, but when's the last time you went to a poor person asking for a job? It just doesn't happen. And if you go to a small company, a small business, I love mom and pop shops. I love those, but they just don't employ a whole lot of people. They don't. The Industrial Revolution was great. The life expectancy before the Industrial Revolution was like around the mid-30s or like low 40s. Okay, the Industrial Revolution now, if you look at some charts, I mean, you have countries like Canada where their average lifespan's like in the 80s, and the United States is somewhere around the 70s, and that's probably just because we have the wealth to drink and eat fast food all the time. I mean, it's self-inflicted here. It's not like our life expectancy is short because, bad conditions. No, we are eating and doing crap we should not be doing. Obesity is an issue here in the United States, and that's because of the free market. We have the ability to do these things. So, it's poor us. I mean, our problems now are other people's blessings. So, let's take a step back. Let's take a step back for a minute. Let's continue to move forward. So let's get down to the principles. What is socialism? Well, first off, in order to have socialism, not communism, but let's just say socialism. You want to? My opinion is it's one and the same. I say that because to go from socialism to communism is it's just one more step. I mean it's hard, there's hardly no difference. I mean you really have to go into detail to explain the difference, because if you read the Communist Manifesto and I mean actually read the darn thing and don't just listen to YouTube videos like me, read it. You can Google it. You can get a free PDF. You don't have to order the book or anything like that. It's free, available online. You can just get on there and look at it. It's 60 something pages, I think, and it's not very long. You can read it, and you really don't even have to read the entire thing, because it wasn't even a really well written document. It was extremely repetitive, and for over and over again, it's for the better part just bashing on the bourgeois. That's really what it comes down to. It's we've got to fight for the proletariat, and the hell with the bourgeois. That it's that over and over and over again. But if you read that, you'll find out that this Marxist-Leninist ideology and the quote-unquote quote democratic socialist ideologies as pushed by like Bernie Sanders and all these other people, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they're about the same thing. There's not much different. The roots of what they're talking about is exactly the same. It's the old tired tactic of hate the rich people, and we're gonna take all the rich people's money and give it to the poor people. Okay, but this at least with like the Communist International, their goal, back when Marx and Lenin was pushing this thing, at least then they knew, hey, we're gonna have to make this a global thing because it's the only way it's ever gonna work. And that's terrible. I don't want that to happen. But even they had the intelligence to know that this will not work in an isolated area. This will have to be globally implemented for it to ever work, because we're going to have to force everybody to participate. So they knew that. But at the core of this, they have to raise taxes, right? So at the very core, they're going to have to raise your taxes and raise them significantly to just redistribute all the wealth. And they're going to tell you that, okay, well, if you're poor, your taxes are not going to go up very high, and the rich people are going to get rich. It's going to be just a more progressive tax plan than we already have, even though the United States has one of the most progressive tax plans in the world. We already have one of the most progressive tax rates in the world. We're going to have, I guess, even more progressive, because the rich are not paying their fair share of the same old talking points. So when that happens, that's just more theft and more slavery. But what? What do you mean theft? Everyone's heard theft. I'm going to explain to you why income taxes in general are slavery. I want to yank you to the farthest extreme, to the other end, because this is a matter of principle first. I want to give you the principle first. Let me take a drink of my coffee. I have my coffee with sugar and a little bit of mocha chocolate creamer. It's good stuff. High caffeine coffee too. So, at the principle, let's say you're an average worker and you work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. You make $10 per hour, okay? And you get taxed 20%. Now, your taxes that you pay, of course, you pay involuntarily. Now, some of you might say, no, I'm happy to pay them taxes. Well, good for you. I'm just giving you the example of those that don't want to pay them. They're going to anyways, okay? Because let's say you don't pay your taxes. Well, at the end of the year, the IRS says, sir, you didn't pay your taxes. And when it all comes down to it, the government will send men in uniforms to your home with guns and point those guns at you if you refuse to comply, and they will either kill you or bring you to prison. Okay, so this entire tax thing, at the end of the day, is only enforced by the threat of violence. Okay, it's not as if this is oh, come on guys, you got to pay your taxes. No, if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to physically harm you or completely ruin your life. You don't have a choice. Okay, now you're paying 20% taxes. So first, let's understand what work is. we have to understand this. This is a key principle. When you go to work, you have your time and your labor, and you are selling your time and your labor to an employer. You mutually agree on a price for that time and that labor. Now, depending on your skill level and your work ethic and your experience and other things, the employer and you may go to the employer and say, look, due to all these things, I, as a human being and in this trade, am worth more money. And he can say yes or no, and you two can agree or disagree. At any point in time, you can say, I don't agree to these terms. I don't want to sell you my time and my property. It is no different, or my time and my labor. It is no different, though, than you selling your personal property. The only difference is you have nothing more important to you than either your family or your personal body, which is your time and your labor. That's your body you're selling. I mean, it's I don't mean to make it sound crazy like prostitution, but it is. That's what we're doing here is you're selling that like a product. You're selling yourself as a product, and it's an even exchange. It's an even exchange. So when the employer gives you money, once you receive that money, that is a direct representation of your labor because it was an even exchange. Okay? Now, if the government is at the end of the week, you've paid 20% out of an 8-hour, $10 an hour. They charge you for 20% out of 40 hours a week. That means that you worked for 8 hours out of that week to pay Uncle Sam, right? So for 8 hours out of that week, you worked for them, and that's your 20% tax rate. So for that 8 hours a week, you were a slave. Because if you did not pay those taxes, which was paying those taxes with money, then that money was a direct representation of your time and labor. That means that you were forced to work for 8 hours of that week. If you wanted to work and continue to earn money to support your family, then you had to work for that 8 hours to pay Uncle Sam. You had no choice in the matter. If you don't, they will show up to your home with guns, point them in your face, and they will either kill you or take you to prison if you refuse to comply. Okay, so are we understanding? I know a lot of times when you start talking about slavery, you're thinking that somebody is physically standing there in front of you. No, this is much more clever. The same result. They're getting the same results, but without the front end of things of having someone. Now, am I saying that our living conditions are bad? No. In fact, our living conditions are great. So I'm just giving you the principle behind that so you can understand it. Where our tax rates are at right now, it's at the point to where I can complain about it, but I'm not going to complain about my living conditions because I believe that we are probably living in the best. We live in America right now, this is probably the best it has ever been. Okay, the fact that you have kids that sit around all day and watch Netflix, and they, all the little techie gadgets and stuff that we have. It's the information age. You can talk to people all around the world. The average person's living condition is incredible. The only reason why people feel like they're being so oppressed is because of what they have in comparison to other people. There's a lot of people that are getting very wealthy. They're getting very rich in America. And those that are not getting very rich feel like they should be because everybody else is, even though their living conditions are incredible. I mean, just consider the fact that even in America, if you live in a single wide trailer in a trailer park and you have a little 40-inch flat screen TV in the living room, you have heat and air, a refrigerator full of food because you're on food stamps and whatnot, your living conditions are way better than somebody that lives in places in like Africa and stuff. I mean, your conditions are incredible. There's people all over the world that's living in no kidding poverty. So it's just all a matter of comparison. Our poor people are not poor in other countries. Okay, so we're going to be getting into this a little bit more, I think, in another video. I'm not done with socialism. I've got a lot more stats and a lot more I want to bring to you. I just don't want to make this video too long. So we're gonna get back into this and probably touch on some of the stuff like the Green New Deal I really want to unpack that. I hope a lot of you have at least read that, and not just listen to what people say. I will say this, like all bills and all lies, there's a lot of good things in that bill. There's a lot of really bad things in that bill. There's some things, but like all things, the very name of this YouTube channel should give you some idea of what's going on in my mind. There's a lot of things that I agree with the left on. There's a lot of things I disagree with the left, and there's a lot of things I agree and disagree with on the right. Therefore, the name of the channel is Nexus, which is the center of it. Okay, so I am somewhat center on a lot of different policies. When it comes to economic policies, I am very much so free markets. I pretty much want the government out of everything, with the exception of some very basic regulations, for the environment. We do need some environmental control, but not to the extent of this Green New Deal, to where we're actually breaking into like Agenda 21 era, and almost getting into conspiracy theories, except for the fact that they are literally saying that they want to do the things that conspiracy theories used to say.